Welcome, everybody, to the newest self-belief series. I am very excited to have Elle Webb join us today. I'm not going to tell you anything about her because I'm going to ask lots of questions, and that's how you'll get to know her. But for those of you who have never been on a self-belief series before, or you're watching this recording for the first time, the idea for the self-belief series came to me a couple of years ago, I think, when I was walking along the beach. And what came to me is that I was thinking and reflecting on the changes that I've experienced personally through the Soul Pleaser program and then the members of the Soul Pleaser program. And I realized that our confidence increases and our self-worth increases and our belief in ourselves increase. But it's because of the self that we believe in. So the self with the capital S, so the true us. And when we've lost our connection to that, I think that's when we lose our connection to our true self. And that's why we lose our confidence and we second guess ourselves. So I've watched a lot of people grow their self-belief throughout the program, and it made me really curious about their story prior to joining the program, because I believe that when we carnate, so we're here we are, that we actually fully believe in ourselves. But then I think because of the influences around us and different things that happen to us, we can lose that self-belief. And then that becomes a pattern for us into adulthood. And until we do the work on that and shift that, we are really missing out on opportunity to have that absolute knowing within ourselves that we can be, do, and have anything we want, and we're here to have fun and enjoy our lives. So I think we learn a lot through stories. I certainly experienced that in our Q&As. We have our Q&As separately. We have a men's group and we have a women's group. And I think that when we listen to other people's questions and listen to their stories, we can really relate it back to ourselves, and it's a really good way to learn. So I hope that that's really useful for you today as we explore and get to know Elle and her self-belief story. So welcome, Elle. Great to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So I would like to take you back to when you were a little girl, and ask you if you can remember when it was that there was perhaps a dip in that innocent self-belief that I think that we all have to start with. How old were you and what happened?
I think it's difficult to pinpoint exactly, but I learned very early to look outside myself for ways to respond and how to behave. And I think I remember I must have been 4 or 5. I specifically remember a situation where someone asked me, and I must have been a situation where I felt there wasn't a right or wrong decision to make, but it was, what's your favorite color? Like a really little question. And I didn't know what to say. And I remember thinking, like, there was no right or wrong answer. So therefore I didn't know what the right or the wrong answer was to say, because I had no one sort of guiding me, or I had no rules around that answer. And I remember thinking that I had no feelings. I was obviously so disconnected with how to tap into how I really felt. And it wasn't really the fact that I didn't know what my favorite color was or that I didn't care or whatever, but I obviously was so used to thinking about what other people were going to think and what was the right or the wrong answer, guiding me as what to say. And I was so disconnected because I didn't think I had any feelings. I had no sort of way of tapping into that. So I distinctly remember that, and I can sort of take myself back to that moment.
It's amazing to think how young we can be, and it really lines up with what we've learned is that we are influenced without a filter generally from 0 to 7. So,
Mm.
and I would say -0. I would say that when we're actually, in in utero, we're taking on everything around us because we can hear it. You know, we know what our mum's thinking. You know, we're taking on her thoughts, not to blame mums, all pregnant mums out there, just relax. But, you know, we are taking all of those things on. And so we can be super young when we already realize that other people's emotions are affected by our actions. And then we start to be careful about that.
Yeah.
And so, how did that sort of progress for you? So, there was some people pleasing very early on for you. Did you grow up witnessing anybody people pleasing?
Yeah, definitely. I grew up in I'm the youngest of four. I have three older brothers, and we're all born within 5 years. So all singletons. So a busy household on the farm, and we had lots of dry years through our sort of childhood. And mum was also working off farm as well. And definitely like like a lot of love from mum and dad, and but definitely like mum was the doer of everything in terms of, you know, she was managing, you know, the home, kids, work, the books for the farm, as well as working full time, and often working in a job that she didn't even really want to do, but for everyone else. So you know, an amazing person, but definitely yeah, definitely compromising herself fathers for sure.
Yeah. And isn't that incredible? Like, she wouldn't have even realized at the time how incredible she was. Like, what that's superhuman when you think about it. Like, you know, you have two little children, and if you think about the gap between
I
the,
know.
was it three of you or four of you?
So there are four of us within 5 years, but yes, so our girls are 2.5 years apart,
Yeah.
and that seems like close enough
Yeah.
gap to me. So
Yeah.
I can't fathom like four kids under school age.
It
Like I
just would
can't
have been.
fathom three kids under school age, you know, like,
Yeah.
and amidst, you know, they, you know, definitely took on the farm in an environment where, you know, they were working through quite a lot of debt and things like that. There were so many things going on. And I mean, our lives now and the expectations around our lives and what we expect and have gotten used to probably before having kids is completely different. But yeah, I mean, I talk to mum about it now and she's like, I don't know how I did it, but we just
Oh,
did.
she wouldn't. It would just be a blur.
Yeah.
And what a superhero, really. And
Yeah.
I think interestingly, it was out of necessity. So her sacrificing
Totally.
herself, it was like she didn't have a choice. Like, food had to go on the table. She had the four kids, so the four
Yeah.
kids needed to be taken care of. She
Yeah.
had to do the off-farm work, had to do the books, and
Yeah.
had no choice. So you can see how we can model something that in under those circumstances, there was no other way out.
Yeah.
You know, potentially selling the farm, but obviously that's not a choice that they wanted to make.
Yeah.
So we are then being conditioned by these conditions. And then we grow up and have luxury, really, in comparison. You know, like, we don't have the same demands on us at all. And yet the behaviors are ingrained because we were young enough when we were watching it to just take it into the rest of our lives. So, how did you navigate being a people pleaser at school?
So I'm just laughing because I know you know what I'm going to say because we're so similar, but you know, I would tied achievement to my worth, absolutely. So yeah, so in schoolwork, in friendships, in extracurricular activities, yeah, so absolutely, you know, like teacher's pet, totally. And yeah, trying to do everything really, like even to the point in my senior years where I was, you know, doing all these extracurricular things. I was the school captain. I was doing all this, you know, trying to get the best grades, you know, and mum would say to me, why don't you have a day off school? Like, I feel like you just need to call your Jason. I'll be like, no way, like I'm going to miss out on something, you know? So definitely, yeah, definitely really high expectations of myself across the board for sure.
Yeah, yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And did it take its toll on you in any way, or did you get away with it for a period of time and then it started to take its toll?
I think I think for me, probably in different ways that I wouldn't have recognized. So I definitely had a period between year 11 and 12, and this is connected to some of the work that I do now, but where in those school holidays, where I was really obsessive about exercise and food. And I came back into year 12 and just had so many other things on that, I just happened to sort of get out of that rhythm of being able to exercise 2 or 3 times a day and focus as much on my eating. So it didn't actually lead to a diagnosed eating disorder, but definitely had health impacts. And you could see that sort of driving that really perfectionistic tendencies. And then in my year, I had a gap year after school, and I'd also had a friend pass away at the end of year 12, just before we finished. And so I had, and I think that first year out of home and things, I didn't have the structure of school. I was working, and definitely that was when sort of more binge eating came into things. So I think through university and things like that continued, that sort of really mixed relationship with self, which came out through probably more body and food side of things, but probably was just an underlying without a lot of recognition.
Yeah, it's interesting how it's quite insidious as it manifests. As most people know, that's what we have in common is an eating disorder in the past, and at that young, vulnerable age when you're trying to meet these really high expectations that potentially you feel others have on you, but you understand now we're just all internal, like really nobody else was driving it except us.
Mm.
And I think the grief thing as well, I also experienced that. I was very homesick when I went away to boarding school. And then my best friend back in Port Lincoln, where I was from, her mum died. And I just was really devastated by that. And then I can't remember what you called him, but in the church, in the Lutheran church, he helped me with my communion, and he died, and he was quite young. And you also had an experience. And I think that when we know that life can end, because until that happens to you and you're fairly young,
Mm.
don't expect it. But when you realize that you can lose somebody, I think there's some fear associated with that. And I believe that trying to control things is a symptom of insecurity. And can you sort of explain how you coped with your friend dying?
Yeah, well, probably initially I didn't. It was very sudden. He unfortunately committed suicide, and he was the other school captain and one of my best friends. So it was a really dramatic time too, because we were all just about to finish our end of year exams. It was extremely unexpected. And I think the thing for me was that I had no idea. And that really frightened me. And I guess, as we've just said, we can often be having these significant challenges without perhaps anyone really else understanding or being able to see that. So, yeah, I think I seemed to cope. Like, as I said to you, I learned very early on how to respond to people around me and do the right thing. So, I was very good at suppressing, and I did this, part of the eulogy at the service, and everyone was like, wow, you're so amazing. You're so strong. And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I wasn't. I was just really good at pushing my emotions down.
Yeah.
um, and I was really good at knowing what the right thing was to do, or the right thing in my head, or what other people would expect of me, and getting that done. So it just goes to show how learned that behavior was for such a long time. And then it really hit me the year after. So I think that was when, I was working, and I was outside of that school community and that structure. I wasn't living at home. So I was about 5 hours from where my parents were. So I didn't have their support close by. I had my friends, but we were all 17, just now like learning how to navigate life. Really, you felt like you were so old, but you really weren't. And so that's really when the focus, so much more focus again on eating, and as you say, that control. But as I know, and as we know, what you focus on, so if you're focusing on so much trying to resist something, or if you're focusing on so much trying to avoid something, you're only going to want it more, and hence drives the binge eating behavior. So so that certainly was a period of time there, and it got to a point of a breakdown, like where I couldn't go to work, and therapeutic support to get through that time.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. It brings up a memory. My mum, I can't remember the timeline of when she told me this, but her brother died when he was 21 of leukemia,
Mm,
and she was pregnant at the time, and she lost that baby, and then the next baby was me, and I'm the oldest,
mm,
and she was binging on, like, she would eat a loaf of bread,
mm,
and you know when I was anorexic, she never told me that she'd had an eating disorder.
mm,
So, because again, you've got to be private about your problems, that was
mm,
that era,
totally.
never talk to anybody about it. And that pushing the emotion down with food,
Mm,
it's just one of the ways. There's so many ways we can do it, but food
mm,
can be one of them. And when you're a high achiever and a perfectionist, then you loathe yourself for doing it,
totally.
because you're trying to be really healthy and be perfect, and exercise well and never eat anything bad and
Mm,
all of those things. And then it's just a vicious cycle. And it really does erode your self-belief and self-confidence, because you're loathing yourself when you do it. Like, for me, when I think about my rock bottom, which was the year that mum died in 2016, I was completely burnt out, didn't know, because she died, and I was lying on the floor crying. It really cracked my heart open and allowed me to feel something instead of living in my head trying to avoid all of these emotions.
mm.
So fast forward to when we met. How did you, I haven't asked you this, how did you first come across me? Was it at a deep dive, or was it before that? When did you first know about me?
Yeah, it was at Farm Owners. But just going back to what you were just saying before, definitely the loathing. And I know there'll probably be people listening to this who can really relate to that. But the other thing for me was I was already into the nutrition course, and I was working for a dietitian. So it was even worse because I had all these expectations on how I should have this perfect diet, which I now know is absolutely ridiculous. Like, there's no perfect diet. And in fact, like, our relationship with food and body is so important to allow us to focus on our health. But it was that loathing and shame, absolutely. And, just total beration of yourself in line with that. Yes, I met you through Farm Owners, Tracy. So I think it was just, I mean, as it always is, perfect timing. But we had just had Audrey, so our first child, at the start of 2021. And that, like, her birth experience for me was like a bit of a spiritual unlocking. Like, I think I did an amazing course called Calm Birth before her birth. And I've been very lucky. Both my births with my girls have been extremely, like, connecting with my intuition and my body. And so I think I probably, until that point, had not really acknowledged anyway any much lack of a spiritual experience within myself. Probably looking back, there were moments, but I didn't actually realize. So that had happened. And then come motherhood. And for someone who is extremely career focused, I had been working in public health as a dietitian since I graduated. I scored a grad job in Melbourne at one of the biggest hospitals there. And then had done various things, and then been sort of gradually, climbing the ladder, I guess, as you want to say. And then when I moved up here to Albury, I worked in management roles. So I guess even more of a focus on ladder climbing, I guess, once you start going into the management side of things. And, just thrived on all the feedback of how much of a good job I was doing from everyone else. I shouldn't laugh, like I
No,
think
but
it's
I know
awesome to
because,
give people feedback, but it was all about what everyone else thought.
yeah,
And
but
that's what I
but
based it on.
but then when you stop working and you have a child and there's no feedback,
No
like
feedback.
this is a real thing. And this is why I'm glad you're
Totally.
talking about this, because I meet so many women who have gone from high flying careers into motherhood and they feel really unappreciated.
Oh, and the feedback you're getting is a crying baby, pretty much no matter what. And Audrey, is a total firecracker. Like, she is so spirited and amazing. But as a newborn, her first 2 weeks of life, she didn't really sleep during the day at all. This whole, feed and put them to sleep. And so I was like, what is going on? I literally remember hanging out the washing, mum had taken Ords and I was hanging out in the washing maybe a week in and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't undo this. I can't undo this. Like, I can't, I'm a parent forever. This isn't a decision where you can just say, no, change my mind. It's not for me.
Yeah.
And I mean,
That's
yeah,
real, but it's real. Those feelings can be real.
totally. So, yeah, maybe I set myself up for it because I knew it would be challenging for me. I knew, and so that belief is only going to make it challenging, right? But
I would
I,
say that's self-awareness because you
yeah,
knew that you thrived on achievement and structure and being in control. And lucky you had an inkling about babies. I didn't. I had Anna and went, what? I took my laptop to the hospital thinking I'd keep working after I popped her out. So you're better than me because you knew you knew what was coming.
so when we got home the first night, I remember John and I saying to each other the next morning, oh my goodness, this is what our friends and family have been through. We had no, you just can't explain it to someone, can you? But yeah, it was a massive identity shake-up for me. Absolutely. And I think because, there was a more spiritual and maternal and nurturing part of me that I hadn't really allowed.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that was trying to come out. And so it was perfect timing. I had always worked in public health and then I had started to be a little bit involved in the farm business while on maternity leave. And then Tom decided to join Farm Owners and then I met you.
And it's interesting because I think that Audrey brought the spirituality in for you. So I think you
Mm,
attracted her and she attracted you and she's for you and you're for her. Because
totally.
I felt very much the same way with Tegan because the story many of you know, accidentally had Anna, love her to death, accidentally had Kiara, love her to death as well. And then said, I'm not having any more. They were 13 months apart and I was running all these businesses. And then one day was driving out in the hills and was in touch with nature and had a vision of Tegan. He was about the age he is now. And I knew he was going to be my son. Came back, told Damien, he's like, have you been smoking weed? I said, no. Imagine me on weed. God help us. And I came to my senses a few weeks later, had the Mirena out and went, I don't have time for another baby. Rang the obstetrician and she said, come in when you've got your next period and we'll put it back in. I was already pregnant. So I think Tegan knew he had a very small window to come in and change my life and also me be, going through what I've been through during the right time of his lifetime. So yeah, there's definitely a bit of a contract going on there, which is always the case with our babies.
Totally. Yeah. And she has absolutely knows exactly what she wants, exactly what she doesn't want, which in our society sometimes is not very convenient for lots of people, and
Yeah.
especially been a bit evident since she started in kindergarten with a bit more structure and things. But she is so like herself, 100,000,000%. And
And
it's
what a
so
great example
inspiring.
for you. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, same. Got two people pleasers and one who totally is himself, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And why did you join the Soul Pleaser program?
Well, I think as soon as I met you, I was like interested in it, but then, still I was very, prior to all this time, like not anything that like was a little bit woo-woo or a little bit like I was like, nah, like it was not for me. Like I can't express how before kids I just would not have been open to it. And I'm not saying like I totally believe in all of your stuff, obviously, like we're talking about it, but it's just so interesting, because the textbooks were the right and anything outside of the textbooks was the wrong, or anything that wasn't, like written in a peer-reviewed article, So I think like so much structure around my right and wrong again. But yeah, so I think it probably took me a few months to actually sign up. And it was really like I didn't actually get diagnosed with postnatal depression after Audrey, but I definitely like was a roller coaster, and probably just a different day I might have been. But I getting back to work, well, I was in a different role, but getting that balance back with a bit of time for me really helped me. But I needed something more. Like I still really wasn't feeling, and I don't know. I was just obviously feeling like this was something, your program was worth trying, because I was wanting to find out who I was, because I was kind of realizing that I didn't really know.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing to reflect on that, isn't it?
Hmm.
And it's quite incredible to think in the scheme of things how quickly you can change. So,
Yeah.
how long ago did you make that decision? About
Well, I don't
2
think I
years?
signed up until 2022. I'm
Yeah,
not
so two
sure.
years down the track. And
Yeah. Yeah.
how would you describe the way that you've changed for people who don't know you?
Well, I mean, I think some people would notice and some people wouldn't, to be honest. Like my close people would notice,
Mm.
but some people who, I mean, I don't know, maybe they would, but I feel really different in me.
And
Like
that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if
yeah,
anybody else
I
notices.
know. Well, that's the whole point, right? But
Yeah.
I think I'm just so much more connected with myself. Like I'm like the self-discovery journey is never done, right? So there's obviously like ongoing things to happen. But I guess during that time too, we had Florence, and I had postnatal depression after Florence. I was actually diagnosed with postnatal depression. So I actually got to a really amazing place
Mm.
before I think probably before we conceived Florence, and then throughout my pregnancy with Florence and everything. And I was in an amazing place, but then, all the hormones and everything, whatever happened. But there were decisions that I made when I was in that great place with Florence that I acted on when I was diagnosed with postnatal depression, not because at the time I could tap in, but because I trusted how I felt
Mm.
and the decision that I made at that time. So yeah, I think I'm more trusting of the world is probably the big one for me. I think I was always looking for data, reasons, all these things, and I'm just able to accept more and to trust more that things are going to work out. I think, like I guess if growing up in an environment where, working really hard to pay off debt and things like that. And so this like hard work and like that sort of mentality and that scarcity mentality was probably instilled in me from quite an early age. And through no fault of anyone's, absolutely hats off to my parents who absolutely worked so hard for us. But just sort of knowing that there's another way, and it kind of aligns with my work in that, we don't actually have to be like obsessed with our bodies and with food to actually look after our health. Like there's another way, there's an easier way,
Yeah.
there's a way to tap into ourselves. And so, yeah, I think I've always been really interested in that side of things from a nutrition perspective, but I've not been there myself. And so through this process, I was sort of on that journey as well. And that sort of allowed that to unfold for me and yeah, go on to help other people. So I think it's that trust is the big thing.
Yeah, and I think that when you trust life, equally then you trust yourself
Yeah.
because you can trust that guidance that you receive because you were looking outside of yourself for the answers in the
Mhm.
science book, you know.
Mm.
And so when you're trusting everybody else, and now like it's just a minefield because of the internet and you could get 100 different opinions. So if you're not going to learn how to trust yourself and you're just going to jump on what this person says, you know, and for health nuts, it's like, oh my goodness, like, should I be eating meat all day or plants all day
Yeah.
or doing HIIT or doing weights or so you
Yeah.
could turn yourself inside out if
Yeah.
you don't learn to trust that emotional response that you get to something which leads you to follow it. And so I think the ultimate evidence of true trust in yourself is to start your own coaching business that is about something that you've been through, you
Yeah.
know. So we also parallel each other in that way, that I was a serial people pleaser and now am what I call a soul pleaser, which just means that I'm guided by those impulses that I get that I happen to say comes from my soul, but you can call it whatever you like. Like people might say it's just a gut feeling, but I believe that that's trusting myself rather than looking outside of myself. And then you have gone from somebody who controlled food and had, you know, those body image issues and got to a comfortable place with it. And now you're helping people. I really think, you know, because a lot of people ask me or they say to me, I'm not 100% there. So am I really ready to teach this? And I'm like, are you kidding? Like, I'm only one step or not even ahead of the people I teach, you know, and the reason that I am able to help people is because I understand, because I've
Mm.
been there or I'm still there.
Mm.
So it is so different to what we have both done in the past, which is we've helped people through what we've learned in a book rather than helping people through what we've learned through experience. And in my personal opinion, and you know, when I compare it with Farm Owners Academy as well, we're all learning from people who have the experience, and I think that that is the best way to learn. So, can you please tell the people who are tuning in about how your new business came about,
Yeah.
and then what it involves, and if people are interested, how they can reach out?
Yeah. Of course I can. So I think when I went on maternity leave with Florence, I knew probably, no, I don't know, 3 months into the role that I was in. So I think it was another 6 months I was in it, that wasn't a role I wanted to be in long term. And I think it was like when I went back to work after Audrey, so I did two separate roles, and yes, they were in a different organization that was closer by, but it was just that public health world just wasn't the right fit for me anymore. And so I knew that I wanted to do something different. I didn't know exactly what that was, but when I went on maternity leave with Florence, it was a contracted role, and that was the end of my contract. And I just said, I'm not going to reapply for it. It's been advertised permanently, but I'm not going to reapply. And despite, all the people saying, oh, you should reapply, blah, 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 which is very unlike me. And I had colleagues going, what do you mean? Like, what do you like? Just how, just do it and then just see how you feel. I'm like, nah, it's not. Like, I just knew, like, I absolutely knew it wasn't right. So, and I sort of like my idea, had been sort of bubbling away in the back of my mind, but we sort of talked about it a little bit, and you were like, don't do anything yet. And I, obviously was having another baby, and you want to do that and focus on that. But I am built to work. Like, there's a level of acceptance that's come around that for me. I think my thoughts used to be, I wish I wasn't, because it would be so much easier if I just wanted to be at home with the kids full time. But I don't wish I wasn't. Like, this is how I am. And
Yeah.
I love working and I love being with the kids as well. But it would not be good for them or for me if I was at home with them full time.
Yeah.
So I probably got itchy fairly early about getting started. And yeah, so I have obviously been through this body image and a really poor relationship with food myself. Probably the last straw for me was having Audrey. You said she brought the spirit, she brought lots of things, but I remember getting home from the hospital and just chucking out our scales. And like that was it. Like I'd already worked quite a lot on myself in that respect from a food and body perspective, but it was the getting rid of the scales then. And then obviously all this work that I've done in terms of being able to connect in with myself has really just probably solidified all of that. So yeah, and then through Florence as well, like I didn't get weighed throughout that whole pregnancy. It just wasn't a focus. I didn't need it to be a focus. There's so many other ways of tracking, and actually they weren't going to do anything about it, my weight anyway. So I just really understood my triggers and was able to, yeah, really, just solidify that process. So I just know that there is women everywhere. I'm not going to speak for men because my program focuses on women. I know that men have body image challenges and disordered eating as well, and the eating disorder rates are increasing in men, but they do impact women to such a greater extent. And I guess the experience of women in their bodies is unique in terms of the society and the expectations. And then those processes such as being pregnant and having a baby and how our bodies change and menopause and things. And, we're just like, there's women everywhere who have got negative thoughts about food and body going through their mind 24/7 that are impacting on their every moment, some of them, and have been, ingrained and sometimes taught to them or learned from generations before. And I've got two girls, like, I want to do everything that I can to get some positive messaging, to have more of a ripple effect of more people speaking, not even speaking about our bodies, just speaking about other things that we want to talk about. And, absolutely focusing on our health, but not obsessing about, what's right or wrong or good or bad. And, that this, you should never eat this kind of food ever, or it's going to have, really toxic implications. Like, we just know that that's not the way it works. And that all or nothing thinking around it is really unhelpful. So I think definitely the girls are a massive driver for me, and wanting to have an impact then for them, like if they end up having kids and things like that. So like there's lots of great work being done, but obviously in the world that we live in, online, like not just online advertising, but everywhere we go pretty much, we'll all be going into Christmas and, probably after this conversation, you might notice more or less the body commentary, people worrying about how much they're eating or how much weight they're going to put on over Christmas and things like that. And it's just like, well, that's actually reducing our opportunity to enjoy that moment. Like,
yeah, we're not present when we're in our head about food.
Totally. And it's like, really, is this one meal or these few days or whatever really going to impact on our health? So, because I think sometimes we reassure ourselves by saying what's about our health. And it's like, well, actually, is the stress and the lack of presence actually having more of a detrimental impact on our health than actually the decisions that we're making? So, so I'm obviously super passionate about it. And so I have dived into the world of online business. I've never run an online business, and I've obviously had some involvement in the farm business and, managed, done business management bits and pieces through public health, but it's very different, particularly in the online space. So definitely learning a lot, but I have an amazing bunch of women who are in my program, and like I'm just never felt so good as when I get off those calls. I shouldn't say that when I've I've got a beautiful husband and beautiful marriage and beautiful daughters' births and things
Oh
like
no,
that.
no, my
You know what I mean?
Q&As for Soul Pleaser are way up there with my experiences too. I
Totally.
I think when you have a story like this where you've experienced something and then you have this person in front of you who perhaps is where you were, it is so fulfilling to be able to support them towards where they would like to be. So can you just explain to those people watching what's involved in your program and how they can reach out to you if they would like to find out more?
Yeah, so the best way to reach me is on Instagram or Facebook. So I think Tracy's put the links to in the ad for this session. And the program itself is a 6-month program, and we have an amazing group of women. So it is really a community, and it's women supporting each other through this. And we have content and we have live sessions together through that time. And I think, the most, unfortunately, often as women, we connect a lot with each other around negative thoughts about ourselves. But it's so amazing to be in a community where we are wanting to think differently about ourselves in terms of how our body image and how we think about food. And it's a really special community because it's not actually how we're taught to think about food and our bodies. Like, we're taught quite early, this is a good food and this is a bad food. And like, we give food a moral value, like you're a bad person if you eat that. And there's a lot of superiority and inferiority around how people eat. And it's really unhelpful language. So it's really helpful to be able to have those conversations together and work on how we're talking about it and thinking about it. And I'm also just loving the ripple effect of those conversations that my clients are having with, their families or their friends around them, and just opening other people's eyes maybe to that there's another way of thinking about it. And there's actually, which, still serves my science brain, is that there is actually really good research around it. Like, we actually know that over 90% of people will not lose weight sustainably on a diet, yet we continue to prescribe them for people. And so it's actually about doing, what's going to be helpful for people as well. We just berate ourselves for not being able to lose weight, yet we know time and time again that for the majority of people it just doesn't work. So it's a beautiful community. There's some, we've got content not only from myself, but we've also got some content from other people. So an exercise physiologist, psychologist, and we've got some breath work coming up with a physio as well, which would be brilliant. So I'm just happy to talk to anyone who's interested. No obligation chat. Just get the word out there anyway, even if you don't want to come aboard.
Fantastic. That's so great, Elle. Well, thank you so much for being a guest today. I really appreciate our conversation. I'm really excited about the work that you're doing. And if you think about what we talk about in Soul Pleaser, what we get and the impact that we have on our body and our health is actually related to our vibration. So if we feel really happy about the thing that we're putting in our mouth, then it's going to be good for us. So, it's really about your thoughts about it and how you feel about it. And I look at the comparison between my mum and my dad, and my dad outlived my mum, and my mum was relatively healthy if we talk about food, and she didn't drink and she exercised. And my dad didn't even drink water. So he lived on beer, Coke, and chocolate. And he outlived my mum. So I think he's a very good example of someone that was just happier and didn't stress as much. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. So raising your vibration, feeling good, being happy, and just relaxing about life will make a really big difference to those things as well.
Totally. And I guess the other thing is like, we know from the Mediterranean way of eating and living, it's absolutely about what they eat, but even more so it's about how they eat it and
The
and their
community.
lifestyle, their
Yeah.
community, that connection. So it is really, it's a much more enjoyable focus than being really obsessed or particular, and allowing yourself to enjoy the things that you want to. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Thanks so much, Elle. Would anybody like to ask any questions? Just unmute yourself if you'd like to, and we'll take questions.